We have another major racial hoax, this one at Albion College in Michigan. And I want to probe the hoax because I want to get to the psychology behind it. The kind of craziness that makes someone fake their own degradation. This would be like someone organizing the burglary or at least staging the burglary of their own house, which people do for insurance money. But here, the motives are not that simple. And so let's begin at the beginning. Just a couple of weeks ago, there was a big frenzy at Albion College because racist and anti-Semitic graffiti appeared on one of the school's Facebook pages. And the photos included messages like white power, die, end, the N-word, KKK. And so naturally, the college went into this sort of formulaic frenzy. There were calls for boycotts of classes, all kinds of activism. The school is taking it extremely seriously. So the campus police began an investigation. Turns out, a 21-year-old black kid did it. He confessed. In fact, his doing it was recorded, as it turns out, on video. So there's confirmation that he was the perpetrator. So here we go again. This is like Jussie Smollett comes to campus. And not only in the culture do we have these incidents. We had, of course, Jussie Smollett. We, of course, had Bubba Wallace, the NASCAR incident. Now, in the Bubba Wallace case was a little bit tricky because I don't think Bubba Wallace was the perpetrator. I think what happened is that some of Bubba's guys went to this garage and amusingly, they saw a rope that was intended. It's one of those rope things that you use to open the garage, a garage door opener. If the automatic opener doesn't work, you've usually got a kind of rope pull that opens the garage. They were like, that's a noose. And they went to Bubba. Now, at some point, Bubba must have figured out that this was not a kind of a racial message. And so he kind of went along with it. So I fault him for that. But he wasn't the perpetrator of it. In any event, on campus, these faked racial incidents are now very common. And the question arises, how do you explain them? What's causing them? I think the answer can be found, weirdly enough, by turning to the discipline of economics. And the very simple, the stuff you learn in Economics 101, which is the law of supply and demand. Here's the simple truth. The demand for racism on the campus and in the culture exceeds the supply. And when the demand is more than the supply, what happens? You have to make more. You have to create more racism to meet the demand. And that's basically what's going on. You have the faking of racial incidents because there's not enough racism to be found. Now, here's the key point. Not enough racism to be found. On the progressive campus, racism is literally nowhere to be found. White kids and whites in general are bend over backwards. They do backward somersaults to accommodate blacks and other minorities. If you do a little experiment, by and large, have a black guy walk on a campus and approach white students and just say, I want you to kiss my feet. I bet you there's going to be a bunch of white students who would do it. Now, of course, you can't do that experiment in reverse. You can't have a white guy walk on a campus and ask blacks to kiss his feet because that'll be a national incident in 5 minutes. So the bottom line of it is these progressive campuses, people are they're accommodating beyond belief to minorities, and so the racism is like nowhere apparent. So this kid decided, and I'm sure he believed the racism was there. It's just like, I never see it. No one ever calls me anything. No one ever treats me badly. Well, you know what? Maybe I need to sort of orchestrate an incident to dramatize the racism I'm convinced is there, but that is nowhere apparent either to me or to anyone else. So that's why he goes ahead and does it. And obviously the kid is psychologically disturbed in some way. But the reason I'm not sympathetic to him is because he's framing other people. He's pointing the finger of blame. They're the white kids on campus. They're responsible. One of them did it. Or the school itself did it. The school is racist. It's structurally, it's institutionally racist. See right here. Here's the smoking gun evidence. So this kid, whether he sees himself this way or not, is like a cop who's convinced that the suspect is guilty, but he has no evidence for it. He doesn't see any proof, and so he plants the evidence. He plants the evidence to frame the suspect in the firm belief that, yeah, this will now prove the stuff that we can't prove otherwise. Now, I'm reminded here of the false Me Too accusations that are made all the time, you know. So-and-so attacked me, the Duke team raped me. No, they didn't. Or even, Christine Blasey Ford Now, in those cases, there's a motive. The motive is revenge, or it's a political motive. The political motive is, let's make sure this guy doesn't get on the court. Let's try to protect Roe versus Wade. Christine Blasey Ford's own attorney said that that was part of what made her come forward. Now, this, however, is where the Albion story becomes more interesting. It really sort of takes off, because you would think that once the black kid said, I did it, the school would be like, phew, we told you, we're not racist. But no, the school took the opposite stance. In fact, it almost seemed like they were a little flustered at the discovery that this wasn't a true racial incident. In fact, they issued a statement essentially saying, even though we have been found to be innocent, we're guilty anyway. Let me read the statement. We know the acts of racism that have occurred this week are not about one particular person or one particular incident. We know there's a significant history of racial pain and trauma on campus, and we are taking action to repair our community. I mean, this statement could not be more dishonest. Almost every word in it is literally false. We know the acts of racism that occurred this week. There were no acts of racism that occurred. The act of racism that they're talking about is fake. It was orchestrated to create a false impression of racism. Yet the college minimizes that. In fact, they imply that it's the history of racism at Albion that may have made the kid do it. That's what drove him to fake the incident in the first place. So even though the incident is false, the college decides we're going to act as if it's true. And my question is why? Why would you do that? Why would someone who essentially has been the victim of a false accusation then plead guilty? It's almost as if Kavanaugh were to say, well, you know what? I've been exonerated. Julie Swetnick was lying. Christine Blasey Ford was lying. They're all lying. But you know what? I'm a sex predator anyway. I'm going to take the responsibility for it. That would never happen. But it's happening in this case, and I want to say why. The reason is actually very clear. These schools, just like many institutions of our culture, have created massive race industries. They're populated by deans and sub-deans and deanlets, all of whom have the job of like fighting racism and promoting diversity and promoting multicultural. All of these people have a job, which is to fight racism. And here's the problem. What if there's no racism to fight? People are going to say, why are we paying these people? And then when it turns out that there is an incident, but it turns out to be false, these people are like, oh, shoot, man, they're literally disappointed that this wasn't a real case. Why? Because they were so ready to spring into action. Here's the proof. Right after the first reports of the racist graffiti, here's the Vice President Sally Walker of Albion. She goes that the city and the school are going to, quote, move into action. Cheryl Krause, a member of the Albion City Council, says she was almost relieved. My first reaction when I heard about it was, oh boy, it's finally come to Albion. A local minister, Donald Phillips, says the incident is an opportunity to, quote, define who we are, what we stand for, what we're about. So you can see all these sort of professional race hustlers, all these people who make a living off of race are suddenly confronted with the fact that there's nothing for them to do. There's no need to spring into action. You don't have to define who you are. Who you are is just fine. And so they go, well, you know what? Let's pretend like it happened anyway. Let's pretend like we still have to jump into action. And that's really what's going on. I think the bottom line of this, and it's kind of sad when you think about it, we're going to see a lot more of these incidents of racial fakery. You know why? Because first of all, the perpetrators, the false accusers, are never held to account. This particular kid, this 21-year-old, has been temporarily suspended, not expelled. And second of all, they've not released his name. The cops haven't released his name. The school hasn't released. Why not? He's an adult. He's 21 years old. And so why don't we know who this kind of young Jussie Smollett is? But we don't, because the college is protecting him. The local authorities are protecting him. And so when there's no responsibility, no culpability, no need to even publicly acknowledge what you did, no need to apologize what you did, and the people you falsely accused are happy to plead guilty, you know you're dealing with a whole bunch of dirty, rotten scoundrels. And the kid, it turns out, is only one of them.